What is up everyone, James Baek here, and welcome to my VGC 2017 team building guide. And finally, it is here. I decided to make my team building guide in the middle of the format because I wasn't exactly sure how this format was going to progress. We've seen a lot of interesting things, new threats as the meta has progressed, and finally, I feel like this is the best point where I think that team building guide would be really good with the information that we currently have. This is a team building guide based off my VGC 2015 team building guide, if anyone has ever seen it. I did make a lot of improvements compared to the old VGC 2015 team building guide because I want to improve my videos, especially for future formats. So let me know in the comment section down below after watching this video how useful it was, how I could improve it, etc. As a disclaimer for this video will not build a team for you people, but it will give tips on and thought process behind the team making process from high level players. Anyway, let's just get started. So before we can build a team in VGC 2017, we first have to know the rules and the format. So if you are unfamiliar with VGC, it is always a flat doubles battle, which means you have 6 Pokemon on a team and you bring 4 in each battle. Pokemon must be obtained from Sun and Moon. It can only be caught or bred in Pokemon Sun and Moon, as well as events can only be obtained in Sun and Moon. Mega Stones are banned this year compared to previous years such as 2014, 2015, and 2016. Z Crystals are a new item that was introduced in VGC 2017 and they are legal. 10-minute player timer. In previous years of VGC, we've always seen an all-around timer for VGC, which means the move animations also counted toward the timer. However, this means your thought process, picking moves as well as choosing what Pokemon to switch in, are now accountable to your timer, and move animations have nothing to do with your player timer. If a player timer runs out, you lose the battle. This format is more like a fusion of VGC 2012 to 2015 if anyone has played those formats. The reason I'm saying 2012 to 2015 is because VGC 2017 isn't a very fast, offensive, high damage outputting format such as 2010 and 2016 with all the powerful legendaries that were in those formats. This format is more bulky, such as in 2012, 2013, and 2015. There are a lot of viable Pokemon, a lot of switching, a lot of type coverage. There's a lot of good old Pokemon, I guess you could call it. It's not like 2011, because 2011 you were only able to use the Unova Dex where it was in black and white, so it only had new Pokemon. But this is more like 2014 where you were only able to use the Kalos Dex in that year, and it had a mixture of a bunch of old Pokemon as well as some new Pokemon. So it's more like 2014, as well as it has some limited options like the fire typing once again, but still has a lot of options like in previous years like 2012, 2013, and 2015. So all Pokemon in the Pokemon Sun and Moon Alola Pokedex are legal in this format, excluding Cosmog, Cosmio, Solgaleo, Lunala, Necrozma, and Magirma. All those Pokemon are legal except the cover legendaries, as I said before, and Tapus and Ultra Beasts are legal in this format. So here I laid out some useful tools which might help with the team building. So we have Pokemon Showdown, which is a battle simulation online, and it's really easy to use. They have a team builder for your convenience. They have a damage calculator, which allows you to make damage calculations for your EV spreads. And they have a Pokemon Showdown VGC 2017 room where you can ask for help, as well as a ladder where you can test your team online before you actually make it in-game. Trainer Tower is also a great website. They have usage stats from events such as regionals, internationals. They have great articles and team reports up there. Definitely some useful information that could be obtained from Trainer Tower. We have the Pokemon Global Link where they update usage stats from the Pokemon Championship Battle Spot ladder, and they always have the high percentage use of moves, items, and natures, as well as the top 12 Pokemon in general. And you can always just search up a Pokemon, see if it's being used on the Championship Battle Spot ladder, and they'll give you the usage stats of that Pokemon, as well as the moves, items, natures, etc. So it's definitely a cool resource. And this year in Pokemon Sun and Moon, they actually gave VGC its own Championship Battle Spot ladder, so you can now just play on the championship battle spot ladder, unlike previous years where you had to use doubles or they only had special battle spot ladder for a certain amount of time. So that is very convenient to test out teams. QR rental teams is a new function in the Pokemon Global Link, which allows you to share teams using a QR code so other players can use your teams. And this is pretty cool because you can test out some Pokemon. Let's say if you want to find a Pikachu team, for instance, you can search one up on the Pokemon Global Link and you could test out that team to give you some ideas. And this also helps if you are building in a group, because you only have to obtain one copy of the team in game, and then you can give out the QR code to help your friends test out these teams themselves. So it's definitely a great resource that is definitely helpful this year. And Japanese blogs, there's a lot of blogs out there for VGC 2017. You can find a lot of Japanese players. It's really hard to find these blogs, unfortunately, but unless you're like active on Twitter, which is probably where you get the main source of VGC info, it's just really hard, but you can find a lot of blogs. I think the main one I want to recommend is All Gaming, which is a website where it's a paid website for the full team reports, but they do provide daily team reports of teams that have done really well at events. So it's definitely worth considering. I'll definitely be linking all of these tools in the description down below if you want to check them out. But these are some tools that are really useful for the team building process, as well as finding team inspiration if you are stuck on what you want to build. So here is something I consider to be the 4 main types of teams. We have hyper offense, defense / stall, balance / good stuff, and gimmicks. So let's start out with hyper offense. Hyper offense usually consists of Pokemon that are able to do a lot of high damage output and are very fast. They usually are able to pick up KOs or able to pressure opponents right away from switching, and usually it's a team that builds momentum off getting these KOs and high damage output. The downside to hyper offense is that these Pokemon are usually exceptionally fast, so they are weak to teams that usually are able to get their own speed control up, such as Tailwind or Trick Room, and they struggle against bulky Pokemon as well sometimes. So next is defense / stall teams, and I quote stall because there really isn't a lot of stalling in VGC, but especially with the timer this year. However, we have seen things like Celesteela mirrors, Porygon 2 mirrors, Celesteela versus Porygon 2, etc. And what these teams, defense / stall, are usually are teams that basically are able to eat up attacks very well as chip away at opposing Pokemon using moves such as Leech Seed and status moves such as Will-O-Wisp, Toxic, etc. They're usually built on defense, so they use moves such as Aurora Veil, Light Screen, Reflect, able to get chip damage onto your opponent using Hail and just certain attacking moves, and are usually carry a lot of recovery moves to heal up. So basically they use the support and they chip away at your team while being able to take a lot of these hits and just recover them up and slowly wear down teams in general. So that is the main nature of defense. They usually are able to rotate Intimidate, such as with Arcanine for instance, able to rotate Intimidate and able just to eat up a lot of attacks in general and just recover off the damage. Balance / good stuff is something we've always seen in VGC, and this year is no exception. There are a big mix of Pokemon where they are just have good overall stats in general, overall base stats, and these kinds of Pokemon are just able to take attacks pretty well as dish out a lot of damage in general. They have high overall base stats, and their stats are usually very well distributed, and we usually see a combination of Pokemon from the hyper offense and defensive categories, and these teams usually are the most consistent teams that do well in VGC. Finally, we have gimmicks, and gimmicks usually relies on a setup that basically is, if you are able to set it up and your opponent can't really stop the setup, that then is able to sweep through a team, or if the opponent is able to stop these setups, then it's a lose. So gimmicks such as Eevee-Mancy, usually paired with things like Psych Up and Baton Pass, Geomancy Smeargle, which is something that we really haven't seen, but we had seen at the beginning of the format with a few times. So Definitely something that's worth considering. And the Quiver Dance, Dancer, or Choreo that's able to set up with Faramosa. And these teams are they're a bit inconsistent at high level play, but if played really well, they can do extremely well. That's why you need answers, because unprepared teams can get swept easily, but if you have the answers, these teams should be no problems at all. So I want to list out some of the common cores that we have seen throughout VGC 2017 so far. So first I want to list Arcanine, Tapu Fini, and Kartana. This core is known as AFK. This core is a Fire, Water, Grass core, and it is just very well balanced. Arcanine providing that Intimidate and Fire typing, allowing to help Tapu Fini against opposing Kartana, as well as physical attackers with its Intimidate ability. Tapu Fini is usually a Pokemon that's able to set up or do a lot of damage with its Specs item, provide a lot of good coverage, helps Arcanine against Pokemon such as Garchomp, and Kartana is a Pokemon that is able to help this core deal with Pokemon that can be very annoying, such as Tapu Lele, able to do a lot of damage. Allegro, for instance, able to threaten both Arcanine and Tapu Fini, and it's a very well balanced core, and it's picked up a lot of usage and popularity and has done really well at multiple regionals. So this core is probably something that a lot of players build around, and you're probably going to see quite a while. Next, we have a Fantasy core with Celesteela, Tapu Koko, and Garchomp, the Steel Dragon Fairy core. And this core is very good because of the offensive pressure that Tapu Koko and Garchomp is able to provide. Ground type coverage as well as electric type coverage has always been good in VGC, and these two combined are very fast and just able to do a lot of damage, as well as they're pretty bulky with Garchomp and Celesteela with their natural bulk, and Celesteela usually invests in bulk. Tapu Koko, not exactly the bulkiest Pokemon, however, it can Volt Switch around and able to switch and pivot into Celesteela and Tapu Koko while doing a lot of damage with the Volt Switch, and able to switch into a Pokemon that's able to take attacks a lot easier. And these Pokemon are definitely very powerful combined together. We have definitely seen Celesteela, Tapu Koko, and Garchomp do well in the beginning of the format especially, but we definitely still see them today, so it's a very threatening core. Porygon 2 and Araquanid have been a combination, a duo that has actually won multiple championships, regional championships in the United States, as well as a few in Europe. I believe it actually might have won, only one actually, in Europe, but it has won at least three in the United States, and it's a combination that's very scary. Araquanid is a very powerful Pokemon introduced in Generation 7. Alola with the Water Bubble ability, able to double the power of Water type moves before adding Stab into a factor, with a very powerful Liquidation. And under Trick Room, Porygon 2 is able to do a lot of work and set up Recover. These Pokemon are very bulky, and they are able to provide a lot of offensive presence as well with Ice Beam and Liquidation. Next, we have Tapu Koko, Tapu Lele, and Raichu Alola. And Tapu Koko, Tapu Lele, Raichu Alola, these combinations usually rely on the Raichu itself. So Raichu had got Alola form in Generation 7, and it has a new ability in typing. It gets Psychic as well as added to its electric typing, as well as Surge Surfer, which is an ability which doubles its speed in electric terrain, and Alola from Raichu is base 110 speed. So it is a very fast Pokemon, and paired with Electric Surge is one of the fastest Pokemon that you could ever see in VGC 2017. And the fact that first turn you could actually switch out your Tapu Koko into Tapu Lele and get a Shattered Psyche, which is boosted by the Psychic Terrain, which is also Stab Factor, to maybe pick up an easy knockout. And it's just a threatening combination because Tapu Koko with Scarf Lele they tend to run, as well as a very fast Raichu is able to outspeed a lot of Pokemon and just deal so much damage to teams that aren't able to take attacks very well. We have Torkoal, Lilligant, and Oranguru next, and this core is able to do a lot of work as well. We saw it a lot more in the earlier stages of the format, but we have the Sun mode which Torkoal and Lilligant provide, and the combination allows for a lot of mind games on the first few turns. the fact that Lilligant can fire off just a very powerful Bloom Doom straight away with the Leaf Storm, being a very high base power Bloom Doom, as well as Sleep Powder that Lilligant can provide, and After You Eruption is able to do a lot of damage in the sun, and Oranguru allows for a slow mode as well, so you are able to set up with Torkoal and Oranguru, and you can go for Instruct Eruption in the sun in Trick Room, and it's able to do a lot of damage and usually picks up a lot of knockouts. A lot of Pokemon already don't take Eruption well, and most Pokemon in the format can't take 2 exactly, so it's a very powerful combination. Another combination you can do with this team is the Torkoal Lilligant, and if you expect Lilligant being threatened a knockout, you could just switch out Torkoal into Oranguru, protect Lilligant, and then the following turn after you Trick Room, watch your Lilligant faint and get up that Trick Room, and then set up for the After You Eruption. So it's a very, very strong core. Mimikyu Snorlax is an interesting core that we've seen. Usually the Snorlax will be carrying the Belly Drum format, and Mimikyu is an interesting Pokemon that helps support the Snorlax. It has many options. With a great move pool, it's able to get options such as Will-O-Wisp, burning Pokemon that might threaten Snorlax on its weaker physical side, able to get moves like Taunt to prevent curses and other moves from helping against the Snorlax, as well as Trick Room, obviously, to help set up Snorlax. So once Snorlax gets a Belly Drum up, it can sweep in Trick Room as Snorlax being one of the slowest Pokemon in the format. Mimikyu also gets options to Z Destiny Bond, and Z Destiny Bond will redirect moves for 1 turn. So Z Destiny Bond with Snorlax can redirect the fighting type Pokemon or fighting type attacks that really threaten the Snorlax and able to render them useless. And if they pick up a KO on the Mimikyu, then that Pokemon will faint, and maybe that's a Pokemon that threatens the Snorlax out of the way. As well as Mimikyu also has the option to have Psych Up, so it can Psych Up the Belly Drum from Snorlax in Trick Room, and then it can just sweep. So very threatening core, and it can be very unpredictable sometimes. So let's talk about threats that teams need answers to. These are Pokemon that are very popular in the game and you need answers to. Otherwise, if you don't have answers to these Pokemon, then you will basically not be able to do well in this format, or a team will not be able to do well in this format. So first, let me talk about Snorlax and Porygon 2. With their normal typing, they are only weak to 1 typing, and that is fighting. And fighting Pokemon aren't really seen in this format. The only fighting Pokemon we've really seen have been Hariyama and a rare Komuro sometimes, but for the most part we don't really see fighting type Pokemon, and that's a problem because of these normal type Pokemon that are very bulky, able to survive attacks, take these hits very well, and they have access to recovery moves such as Gluttony, one of the 50% healing berries on Snorlax with Recycle, able to keep getting those berries back up, and Porygon 2 with Recover. And these Pokemon are very threatening. Snorlax can set up a curse or a Belly Drum, and once Snorlax gets enough curses, or if it gets his Belly Drum up and you can't threaten the Snorlax, it's getting ready to sweep your entire team. And Porygon 2 is one of those Pokemon that is very annoying because it's a Pokemon that basically negates a lot of your damage. It can take your hits and then just recover up the damage. And if you don't have a really solid answer to Porygon 2, it can just Toxic Stall your entire team, potentially, if it does carry Toxic. And it can get multiple Trick Rooms up, and it's a very problematic Pokemon. So you need answers to Snorlax and Porygon 2, a Fine type move. And I'm not just saying just any like strong attacks. You could just go for strong attacks onto Snorlax and Porygon 2, but these Pokemon are so bulky that they can eat up your strong attacks such as Life Orb, Thunderbolt, and Electric Terrain from Tapu Koko. They can even eat up Tectonic Rage from Garchomp pretty comfortably. They're very insane, and you need a way to do. If you are hitting them with strong mounts, you need a way to at least do 60% consistently to these Pokemon, and I mean like a move that can actually do 60% every time, or you can't outstall them. So you need either a fighting type move, which is why Kartana's picked up popularity, Sacred Sword, allowing you to bypass the curse boost from the Snorlax, do decent damage to the Porygon 2. Toxic has also been something that we've seen, able to wear down Porygon 2 and Snorlax, so they can't really stall out as much, as they will eventually faint to the Toxic, or just set up Pokemon in general. Things like Swords Dance or Calm Mind. These setup moves allow you to help against the Snorlax and Porygon 2 to deal more damage to these Pokemon. The next Pokemon I want to talk about is Eevee. And as I said, it's not the Eevee itself, but usually the Eevee teams. Because again, as I said, Eevee teams, if you're unprepared, they can sweep through your entire team. You need an answer to those Eevee teams. And I'm not talking about Roar or Taunt. You need a game plan against Eevee. You need a game plan against Eevee because they can psych up. They have various options. They have Follow Me support from Clefairy. They have Fake Out Pressure. And they can play around your Roar, Taunt, etc. And finally, let's talk about Celesteela. Now, Celesteela is an annoying Pokemon in this format. I don't know why they gave such a Pokemon a great typing, as well as great overall stats, as well as the Leech Seed. And this Pokemon, if you aren't careful, can just outstall your entire team using Leech Seed. Because Celesteela has great bulk, all its stats other than speed are over base 100. So it's able to do a lot of healing consistently with Leech Seed, able to stall you out, as well as provide a lot of damage with Heavy Slam. So it's a very threatening Pokemon, and it can really just stall out a lot of teams. And if you don't have a way to break Celesteela, it's gonna be a very problematic Pokemon. Of course, Celesteela has dropped in usage, however, it is still commonly used, so you need answers to Celesteela. And finally, before you make a team, make sure your team has game plans for the following. Weather has always been used in VGC. Usually you see a Weather Setter paired up with a Pokemon that's able to get its speed boost doubled by one of the abilities, such as Swift Swim, Chlorophyll, Sand Rush, and I believe it's Slush Rush from Sand Slash, but I don't remember. But Weather has always been something in VGC, especially if you look back in 2016. 2016 was probably the most Weather dominated format, and Weather has always been good. It's able to provide a lot of damage with the boosting attacks. We've always seen Pokemon such as Tyranitar do well in formats that it's been legal. We've always seen Rain, Politoed was always something that was good. And we saw 2014 Charizard Y was able to do a lot of work. So Weather has always been a part of VGC and definitely a huge stretch. So we have seen Golduck, Pelipper do a lot of work with the strong water type attacks they provide. Tailwind from Pelipper, Wide Guard. It's definitely a strong duo. As I talked about the Torkoal Lilligant having the strong options of After Your Eruption, Sleep Powder, or just that fast Bloom Doom in general. We saw Stoutland and the Gigalith, and they are able to provide After You, Continental Crush potentially, or maybe Breakneck Blitz. It's definitely strong. And Ninetales and Sandslash with the Aurora Veil from Ninetales, making the entire Hail team even more bulkier, and you're taking chip damage, don't forget, as well as Sandslash threatening with a lot of strong attacks such as Icicle Crash, Iron Head, and usually Earthquake with the Groundium Z, so it does have options to Tectonic Rage. Hard Trick Room, I feel like Gavin Michaels, a player in the United States who has won 2 regionals using Hard Trick Room, has definitely shown us that you need to at least have some kind of way to beat Hard Trick Room, because if you don't have an answer to Hard Trick Room, it's not going to go well for you. Just these Pokemon that are able to survive under Trick Room, we actually used to think that Trick Room wouldn't be that great in the format just because that most of the Pokemon in the Alola decks were pretty slow, but I think that has to be reconsidered because a Hard Trick Room going negative speed Ivies, negative speed Natures, in order to get the minimum speed on your Pokemon, able to outspeed everything under Trick Room and able to do a lot of damage as well as provide bulk. It's very hard to knock out Pokemon that are built bulky and offensive in Trick Room, and it's able to just to destroy entirely unprepared teams. Good stuff, we will always see good stuff, and if good stuff is always something you will see, and usually it's about 60% of teams you will be facing will be good stuff. So you definitely need a game plan. If you can't beat things like AFK cores, then you definitely need a different team. You definitely need a different team, or you need to change it right away to fix it. But good stuff, always around. Always these Pokemon will always be good. They have great stats overall, and able to do consistent work against a lot of common teams. And Eevee, you need a game plan for Eevee. As I said, you you're either unprepared and you lose, or you're prepared and it's actually an easy matchup. So finally, let's get into the team building process, building around an idea or a core. When building a team, the best idea for building a team is to build it around a certain core, such as the Fire Water Grass core or the Dragon Fairy Steel core, a certain Pokemon, or an idea. Let's say I have Mischievous and I have Magnezone. Maybe I want to run Skill Swap so I can Skill Swap Levitate onto my Magnezone. After you have an idea or a core you choose to build around, choose Pokemon that can support your core or cover weaknesses that your core has. There are multiple options of Pokemon, so feel free to use them, as well as unorthodox Pokemon if they accomplish the role they are needed to do. So don't feel bad, such as Togedemaru for instance, able to have Lightning Rod as well as Fake Out Pressure. There are a lot of interesting Pokemon that are in the Alola Dex, and with the right teammates they can do a lot of work and shine. So definitely it's good to look around the Alola Dex and see if there's anything that might just fit your team. You might find some surprising answers and they might turn out better than you have expected. When you add a new Pokemon to your team, see if that allows you to change anything on your team. EVs, natures, movesets, items, etc. So basically what I'm saying is, usually if you change your team even a little bit, that might just change the entire dynamic of your team. For instance, I'm going to give an example. Let's say I have a team of Garchomp, right? And I decide, and my Garchomp set is just Dragon Claw, Earthquake, Swords Dance, Protect, right? It's a Jolly Nature, 252 attack EVs, 252 speed EVs, and 4 special defense EVs, right? So I have that Garchomp, and I decide to add a Tapu Fini onto my team. Now, what Tapu Fini does, it has this ability called Misty Surge, which brings Misty Terrain, and what Misty Terrain does is it has the power of Dragon type moves. So I might consider, do I really need Dragon Claw on a team with Tapu Fini? Maybe I would benefit more for covering the weaknesses, such as having Fire Fang to help my Tapu Fini out against Kartanas, or maybe adding Poison Jab onto my Garchomp to help against opposing Tapu Finis that might cause trouble. Or let's say I add Mandibuzz to that team as well. If I add Mandibuzz to that team, maybe I want to have an Adamant Nature on Garchomp, since Mandibuzz provides speed control with Tailwind, so maybe I want to benefit more by getting more offensive damage output, and maybe I even want to go a bulkier set with Garchomp. By adding these different Pokemon and changing even one moveset, it might just change the entire dynamic of the team, changing EV spreads, natures, movesets, items, etc. So definitely something to consider, and as always, just repeat steps 2 to 4 until you have your team. So I'm going to answer some frequently asked questions that I get throughout team building. So these are all questions I will answer throughout the video. Do you need a Tapu or Ultra Beast on my team? No, you do not. A good example would be Gavin Michaels' regionals winning team. He won 2 regionals, just changed one mon, and both those teams didn't have an Ultra Beast, didn't have a Tapu. It's definitely not necessary. If a team is able to work, it works. You do not need a certain thing that everyone else is using. Is speed control necessary on a successful team? Let me just say this, speed control is not necessary. It's not absolutely necessary on a successful team. However, most successful teams do carry a form of speed control, so that's something you might want to consider, but it's absolutely not necessary on a successful team. Should most Pokemon on my team carry the move Protect? And I am going to talk about the move Protect in a bit. However, you do not need the move Protect on your team. There are some teams where you don't need Protect, and a lot of Pokemon that just have better move slot options, such as Porygon 2, where you don't need Protect in general. So next question, is it okay to run 2 or more choice items on my team? Yes, it is okay if that's how you want to approach that route. Choice items are very strong, allowing a 1.5 increase to a stat of either attack, special attack, or speed, and these choice items can be very invaluable, allowing you to do a lot more damage or outspeed Pokemon that you want to naturally outspeed. And a good example would be Alex Agloza. In 2014, Alex Agloza ran 3 choice items to win. US 2014 Nationals. He had Choice Scarf Polytone, he had Choice Specs Hydreigon, and Choice Band Talonflame. And I have definitely used 3 choice items in the past. In 2014, World's Last Chance Qualifier, even though it was seniors, I still made it through the World's Chance Qualifier. I did use 3 choice items. I used Choice Scarf Sock, Choice Banded Talonflame, as well as Choice Specs Hydreigon, so it's definitely viable. Can I have more than 1 Z Crystal on my team? Yes. Now, there are definitely a lot of teams that usually have 1 or 2 Z Crystals depending on the situation. And the most I would say is the most Z Crystals you should have on a team are 3. Because if you have 4 or more Z Crystals, you're going to be guaranteed to bring 2 Pokemon with a Z Crystal. And in that case, basically you have a dead weight item. So basically, what I say is Z Crystals are nice. Remember, you can only use 1 Z move in a game. You can only use 1 Z move in a game. So you can definitely have more than 1 Z Crystal on a team. A lot of teams do work with 1 or 2 usually. Not many teams run 3, but it's definitely possible, and I have seen teams with more than 2 Z Crystals. However, there should not be more than 3. There should not be more than 3 Z Crystals, especially because there are a lot of viable items out there: Life Orb, Assault Vest, choice items, berries. There are so many different items, and they're probably more useful items than just having another Z Crystal to your team. Things you want on a team. Make sure you have a counter to the most popular Pokemon in the format, such as AFK cores, Garchomp, etc. Continue to check the global link often for the most common Pokemon on Battle Spot, as well as Pokemon Showdown for the usage stats. Have a way to deal with some of the most popular strategies in the format, such as Weather and Trick Room. It is recommended that you should have a balance of power, bulk, and speed on your team. However, this is optional. As I said, it is recommended. However, some teams do function without it, such as I said, hyper offense teams usually are an exclusion to this rule because they usually have just fast Pokemon that are able to do a lot of damage. So that is the reason why they are excluded. However, most successful teams that we see, especially at the Pokemon World Championship, usually have a nice amount and balance between power, defensive power, and speed. You don't want a team to be too fast, you don't want a team to be too slow. You kind of want to have Pokemon that are able to fit around different speed tiers. And Protect, as I said, is a move that most VGC 2017 Pokemon have in order to scout what your opponent's going to do, or stall out Weather, Trick Room turns, etc. Pokemon holding a choice item, an Assault Vest, or having a Protect move pool are usually exceptions to these rules because you don't have Protect when you run these items most of the time. And there are some Pokemon that just have a better move pool in general, such as Porygon 2. It's a Pokemon that's so bulky and it's able to have Recover and Trick Room, so you don't need Protect. You could just run better options such as Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, Toxic for the last 2. Whimsicott is a Pokemon that usually doesn't carry Protect because it has so many nice support moves: Fake Tears, Encore, Tailwind, Taunt, Nature's Power, Moonblast, etc. Optional things you may want on the team. Follow Me and Rage Powder have been moves that have been really good in VGC. We've seen Pokemon such as Pachirisu, Amoonguss, Clefairy do really well in VGC because the redirection support is able to help heavy hitters or Pokemon on our team that are able to use a setup move. Status is always a big thing in VGC, like Burn and Paralysis. It is not necessary to have status moves on a team, but it does help cripple your opponent. Support moves like Reflect, Light Screen, Aurora Veil, Snarl, Helping Hand, Taunt, etc. are very useful in VGC to help gain an upper hand. Fake Out is a move most VGC teams have in order to set up strategies such as Trick Room, Icy Wind, etc. Priority moves help in some situations where it allows a Pokemon to move first. There are abilities that help make some moves have priority. Prankster, which allows status category moves to have a +1 priority, usually on Whimsicott and Murkrow in this format, and Gale Wings, which allows flying moves to gain a +1 priority, which is on Talonflame. So in VGC 2017, there's a new mechanic known as Psychic Terrain, and what Psychic Terrain does, it prevents a Pokemon from the opposing side to affect a Pokemon, well, on the opposing side, to hit it with a priority move. So if you Brave Bird into an opponent's Tapu Lele, for instance, it will not work. If you go for Prankster Fake Tears, it will not work. And also priority moves with Prankster have been nerfed because they do not work on dark types anymore, which is an interesting mechanic. And speed control isn't necessary, as I said before, but are very helpful on most teams. Tailwind, Thunder Wave, Icy Wind, Electro Web, String Shot, Trick Room, etc. These are all moves that are really helpful on most teams. Some questions that you should ask yourself during the team building process. Am I weak to a certain team composition? Am I weak to AFK cores? Am I weak to hard Trick Room? Is there anything I can do to improve or change this matchup? Am I bringing every Pokemon on my team to games? This is very important because if you're not bringing a Pokemon to games, it might just be better to have a different Pokemon in general. Is this Pokemon doing the job I need it to do? Am I comfortable using this team/core? If you're not comfortable playing with the team/core, you're probably either A, you're not going to really be able to utilize the team to its full potential, or B, you're not going to be able to build it to its full potential. Here's my advice from personal experience for team building. A team might do well even if it looks weird on paper, and a team might do bad even if it looks good on paper. So let's say someone handed me a Pace Spin on Showdown, and I could say, this looks weird, or this looks good. So I can't exactly say that the team does well or does bad. The reason why is because you actually have to play with the team in order to grasp how the team works, because you can look at it, theory it. However, real experience is what you need for a team in order to determine if it's useful or not. So that is the reason why I don't help many players with team building or look at pace spins and stuff, because unless I play with the team, you can't exactly determine if it's good or bad just by looking at it. Do not hesitate to replace a Pokemon if it isn't being brought. I feel like a lot of new players just don't replace a Pokemon, probably because they like it, but they don't actually bring it. Let's say, oh, this is my favorite Pokemon, but if it's not being brought, what's the point of it? Like, what's the point of it? There's probably a bunch of Pokemon in the Rolodex that you could be using. It fulfills a role, it does what you need it to do. Even if this Pokemon helps with a matchup, if you're not bringing it even to that matchup, what's the point of having it? You might just want a different Pokemon in general that could help with that matchup. If you aren't comfortable playing with the team, try changing some sets, EVs, items, or even Pokemon. As I said in the example with the Garchomp and Tapu Fini and Mandibuzz, if you aren't comfortable with the team, you might just want to try changing some of the sets, and of course, it can change the dynamic of the team, so be careful. If you're still not comfortable with the team, write the original team idea down somewhere and save it for a later date. It just might not be something that can be completed until later in the season as the metagame progresses. So maybe you have a great team idea, but it's just something that's hard, or you're struggling to finish it. So it might just be something that can't be built later, or maybe you need ideas from later in the season when we're seeing more of these internationals and regionals, and maybe you get the ideas from these streams, and maybe it's something that you can incorporate to your own team to complete it. If you want to add a Pokemon that is uncommon but fulfills a certain role, it doesn't hurt to try it out. As I said, if a Pokemon is able to do a role and it's able to do a good job, it doesn't hurt to experiment. It really doesn't hurt. Team building is all about experimenting. You gotta experiment what you're comfortable with. You gotta experiment, is this Pokemon actually useful? You gotta experiment, does this Pokemon take hits? Is it able to do the damage I need it to do? Etc. If you have 5 Pokemon on a team and are struggling to find a last member, it doesn't hurt to experiment around by adding random Pokemon to the team. And I don't mean like random as such as you random number generate one of, like from the Alola Dex, and you pick, I don't know, let's say Volibee. No, what I'm talking about is at least have some logical conclusion, or maybe it's a Pokemon that's just useful on a lot of teams, such as Garchomp, like adding Garchomp to your team because it's always a consistent mod, or maybe adding Gyarados because you want to intimidate. The reason why I'm gonna say it doesn't hurt to add random Pokemon is just because the fact that it doesn't hurt to experiment around. I feel like experimenting around, keeping a copy of the team, and just changing that slot over and over again doesn't hurt at all to try out. An example I'm going to give is I was building for a VGC 2017 Premier Challenge in January, and I was playing with knockoff Mandibuzz on Showdown. However, the fact that knockoff Mandibuzz wasn't legal, so I wasn't able to use it for my Premier Challenge, and I couldn't come up with a team. So about, like, I think I was on a line in Starbucks. So basically I had to get my team ready. I had like about 20 minutes left, and I'm like, okay, I should probably figure out something. So what can I do to add to this team that can fulfill Mandibuzz's role? And the Mandibuzz provided two options: speed control with Tailwind, and the ability to knock off to allow me to hit Porygon 2. So I decided, let's add Ninetales, because what Ninetales does is it helps me provide against Garchomp, which gave my teams a bit of trouble, as well as Icy Wind support, and it also provided a useful niche role in Aurora Veil, and some weather control against maybe double duck issues I was having. And then for another Pokemon I added, I decided, let's go with Muck, because Muck is a Pokemon that could have helped my Tapu matchup, which, you know, I didn't struggle against, but it would have been nice. But having that knockoff to help against Porygon 2 was very useful. And what happened after that? I won the Premier Challenge. I ended up winning that Premier Challenge. So it definitely doesn't hurt to add random Pokemon and experiment around. You might even like it, surprisingly enough. But don't expect the first draft of a team to become the final product, because usually it doesn't. You're always going to go through adjustments. You're always going to change the EV spreads, maybe the natures, the movesets, change Pokemon, etc. It takes multiple trials, and you have to repeat the process over and over again. It's a grueling process sometimes, but building that perfect team that you're comfortable with and is able to do consistently well does take a lot of work. So let's get into testing the team. After having a completed team, be sure to test it on Pokemon Showdown or Battle Spot, or by having best of 3s with people. The reason why I'm saying test it on either Pokemon Showdown or Battle Spot is because this allows you to get a feel for the team, and then having best of 3s with people, because usually most events that are big usually are best of 3 with best of 3 Swiss, and what this allows you to do is test your team in the best of 1 scenario as well as the best of 3. Like, a team might do well in the best of 1, however it might not have enough tools and resources to actually do well in the best of 3, so it always helps. You can always find best of 3s in the VGC Showdown room by asking for people. You can go on forums such as Trainer Tower, etc. to find best of 3s. There's always people looking. Even on Twitter you can find best of 3s with people. And there are a lot of Facebook groups, etc. If you are having trouble with one Pokemon or strategy consistently, adjust your team in order to have a better way to prepare for it. Again, simulations are always great, like figuring out what you would lead against a team like this, or how do I play around this matchup, things like that. No, teams can continue to adjust as the metagame advances, so make sure the team you are using can handle the most recent changes. And I think the best example I can give of this would be 2015 with the very, very standard team of Kangaskhan, Heatran, Amoonguss, Cresselia, Landorus Variant, and Thundurus Incarnate. A team that was really used, very common at the beginning of the VGC 2015 format, and then, you know, we didn't really see it as much toward the middle where all the nationals were happening, and then we got to Worlds, and then at Worlds, Japan showed us all the changes. It went from usually max speed, Kangaskhan, leftovers Heatran, very defensive Cresselia, Choice Scarf Landorus, standard Amoonguss, standard Thundurus, into changes at the World Championship where we saw a slow, bulky Kangaskhan, very offensive Cresselia, Assault Vest Landorus, Shuckleberry Heatran. We saw all these changes to the team, and Japan showed us that it was still a very consistent team overall. So definitely teams can change. You might notice that if you decide to play a team that you haven't played in a few months, and you might notice that it feels a lot different to play that team. So definitely changes are necessary if you haven't used a team for a while usually. Teams can take as short as 5 minutes to adjust to your liking to months, so do not feel discouraged about your team. If you are still dissatisfied with your team, scrapping it is an idea, or taking what you liked from your team and turning it into a new core are options. If you feel the team is good enough, build a team in game and test it on the championship battle spot ladder, since showdown and in-game have different feels. If you decide to play showdown and then you actually want to build a team in-game, this is usually how you want to do it. And the same idea with best of 1 versus best of 3, as I already covered before. And if the team does well and you are comfortable with it and understand how it works, you have made a successful VGC 2017 team. So that is how a VGC 2017 team is made from my perspective. I hope everyone enjoyed this video. If you found it helpful at all, feel free to leave a like down below and comment about the video. Did this video help you? What kind of improvements do you want to see? What kind of things I can do to make, you know, videos like these even better for future formats? And definitely let me know. Share with your friends if they are having troubles with building a VGC 2017 team. Otherwise, that is it. Check out my other stuff. You can always find me playing on the VGC 2017 Championship Battle Spot ladder on YouTube. Otherwise, I will see you around in another video.